to the Way of the Taibhsear podcast. This is episode 28, Beltane 2010. This week's Celtic god is Cernunnos. Cernunnos is the horned god of the Celts. He represents the physical embodiment of nature and is a fertility god. In his Oak King aspect, Cernunnos rules the lighter half of the year, from the winter solstice to the summer solstice. In his Holly King aspect, he rules the darker half of the year, from summer solstice to winter solstice. One of the earliest known depictions of Cernunnos is on the Gundestrup cauldron from the late Latinian period, around the 1st century BC. Cernunnos is often depicted with animals and is therefore considered the lord of the animals, and sometimes the lord of the wild hunt. Cernunnos is probably the archetype for the devil created by the Christian Church to discredit paganism. The early Church tried to eliminate worship of the pagan gods by turning them into symbols of evil, hence the depiction of a devil with horns. However, Cernunnos is a god of goodness and light, and the lord of the forest, fertility, and the abundance of nature. He's associated with the oak tree and the wolf. Incidentally, the Bible never mentions a horned god as Satan. Invoke Cernunnos when you are in need of bringing things into fruition. If Cernunnos has entered your life, look for abundance and prosperity around the corner.
On whom did the cattle of Thethra smile?
ocean's edges, in a fortress of Gabriel Taibhsear sea. I am a soul and spirit. I am reborn, an enchantment of the wind. So say we all. Someone. I am Carnalos. On last week's podcast, we read the 1904 story, The Coming of Lu, from the work Gods and Fighting Men by Lady Gregory. This week we will be looking at the shamanic aspects of Lu's birth. In the story of the birth of Lu, it is mentioned that Balor of the Evil Eye lived on the island of the Tower of Glass. Most scholars agree that this island and the island of Avalon are one and the same. The Isle of Avalon is associated with the mysteries of the otherworld. Therefore, the fact that Balor comes from the Isle of Glass indicates that he would be a master of the mysteries of the way of the Taibhsear. The former, or the Fomorians, were the ancient gods of the underworld. They were giants seen as the physical embodiment of chaotic powers such as lightning, thunder, earthquakes, and other disasters. The story says that Balor was a pirate, making a living by preying on ships that passed by his island and his tower of glass. Balor had the power to make this tower disappear at will, so that those who thought to attack it might believe they had succeeded in destroying it when it disappeared. The sons of Nevid believe they have destroyed Balor's tower because it disappeared when they attacked it. But they were soon destroyed themselves when a giant wave washed over them, sinking their vessels. This part of the tale would seem to indicate that Balor has the power over the seas as well. This fits in with the notion of the Fomorians as the physical embodiment of the powers of chaos inherent in nature. The story then goes on to tell about Balor's evil eye and how he got it. It seems his father's druids were making spells of death. This spell casting involved fire in some way, and when Balor passes the window and looks inside when the druids are doing their work, the smoke from the fire enters his eye, poisoning it. From that moment, any person whom Balor looks upon with that poisoned eye dies. This version of the story says that Balor's men had to lift his eyelid with a ring of ivory. Other versions of the story have Balor's eyelid growing heavier and heavier over time, so that eventually it is attached to a ring of iron and must be lifted by 10 strong men. This story of how Balor got his evil eye makes him a sort of anti-Taibhsear. Taibhsear became a great bard when he accidentally received 3 drops of a potion of inspiration from Caridwen's cauldron. Balor receives his evil eye when he accidentally looks upon his father's druids making spells of death. In Taibhsear's case, his divine powers of inspiration grow over time. In Balor's case, his eyelid grows heavier and heavier over time, indicating the cumulative effects of the burden of bearing such a curse. It could be said that having an eye that continually sees evil can eventually lead to a more and more chaotic existence, causing death and destruction all around the person who suffers from such a curse. This part of the story also indicates that an effective shaman must be familiar with the darkness and the chaos, as well as the light and the forces of order. Balor's downfall later in the story comes because he never learned how and when to leave the darkness. Balor was fearless in battle because of a prophecy. As the story says, now a druid foretold one time that it was by his own grandson that he would get his death. And he had at that time but one child, a daughter whose name was Ellen. And when he heard what the druid said, he shut her up in the tower on the island, and he put 12 women with her to take charge of her and to guard her, and he bade them never let her see a man or hear the name of a man. The tower in which Ellen is imprisoned is reminiscent of Briid's fire temple at Kildare in Ireland. According to Heraldus Cambrensis, writing in 1187, Briid's fire temple is surrounded by a hedge made of stakes and brushwood, and forming a circle which no male can enter. And if anyone should presume to enter, which has been sometimes attempted by rash men, he will not escape the divine vengeance. According to the lore of the fire temple, Briid and her 19 virgin priestesses, called the Daughters of the Flame, kept a blaze continually burning in the temple as a symbol of Briid's power and beauty. Once a year at Imbolc, the local folk would extinguish their own hearth fires and relight them by carrying torches to the fire temple and lighting them from the eternal flame there. So Briid's fire temple is symbolic as a bringer of light and warmth to hearth and home for the entire village. If we view the story of Ellen's imprisonment as an archetype of the fire temple, then Ellen becomes a representative of Briid. In her tower prison, the only men she has ever seen were those passing in coracles, and the one man in her dreams. From our earlier podcast on Taibhsear, we learned that coracles were small boats often used by druids in vision-seeking ceremonies. As a symbol of the womb of the mother goddess, they aid Taibhsears in finding their visions. It is significant that the only men Ellen has ever seen are those engaged in shamanic journeys. That is, of course, except for the literal man of her dreams, Cian. When she asks the Vestal Virgins who guard her to tell her about these men, she receives no answer. This probably only piqued her curiosity, but isolated as she was, she could only imagine what these strange creatures were. Since a druid foretold that Balor would meet his death at the hands of his own grandson, and since he had his only child imprisoned in the tower, Balor was fearless, believing he could not die. He believed himself invincible because he believed that he had thwarted the prophecy by making sure he never had a grandson. Unfortunately for Balor, he brought his own fate upon himself by the very act of attempting to avoid his fate. This is a common theme in Celtic epics, that the hero, by attempting to avoid his destiny, instead brings it to pass. After describing Ellen's fate, the story moves on to the tale of Lu's father, Cian. There are 3 things in the story that let us know immediately that we are dealing with a god or a demigod. The first is Cian's dwelling place, Drun na Tenya, the Ridge of the Fire. In ancient times, signal fires were lit atop mountains as a means of communicating warnings of impending attacks. Interestingly, such fires were often lit to warn villagers of the approach of pirates like Balor. If this is the case, then Cian could be seen as a messenger of the gods. The Ridge of the Fire could also be a reference to the blacksmith's forge that becomes significant later in the story. One of Briid's arts as a triple goddess is that of the blacksmith. So we already have something in common between Cian and Ellen, a common link to Briid, the Exalted One. Furthermore, Ellen is the daughter of Balor, a god of chaos, and Cian is the son of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the gods of order. So this couple is a union of the powers of chaos and order. The second thing that lets us know that Cian is a god is of course the fact that he is the son of the Tuatha Dé Danann, or the children of the goddess Danu. The third and final thing that lets us know that Cian is a god is the fact that he was the lord of the land who possessed a magical cow, the Glasgavnian, who never failed to give milk. This cow is reminiscent of the magic cauldron of the Dada, which was never empty. This is a symbolic way of saying that Cian is a god of plenty and prosperity. The next thing we learn about Cian is that he is one of 3 brothers. One of his brothers, Gwevneu, is a blacksmith of great reputation. The other brother's profession is not named in the story. Beltane is, however, the brother responsible for letting Balor steal Cian's prized cow after falling for his trickery. When Beltane has let Balor steal the cow, Cian rushes off in pursuit of his prize. Cian's first stop is to ask a druid how to defeat Balor. The druid tells him that so long as Balor lives, the cow will never be brought back, because Balor's evil eye is death to any enemy who comes within his sight. Not willing to accept defeat, Cian then went to a female druid named Birug. After not having any success with the male druid, Cian talks to Birug of the mountain. Interestingly, the name Birug means separation. This could have significance in that Ellen was separated from humanity on her island prison, or it could have significance in the fact that Birug was a druid of the mountain. On our podcast about Taibhsear, we learned of the Feralith. The Feralith were druid alchemists and magi who lived at Taibhsear, which is a mountain city and fortress. These druids were the best of the best. It could be that this mountain that is associated with Birug is the same mountain of the Feralith. If that is the case, it would explain why she is able to offer a solution when the male druid Cian spoke to could not, because she was trained by the best of the best. So Birug, a shaman and seer from the mountain of Taibhsear, sets Cian on the path to his destiny. The first thing she does is to dress Cian in a woman's clothes. This type of guising by putting on the clothes of the opposite gender has a long history throughout many shamanistic cultures across time, from Siberia to Native Americans to the Celtic world. The Aboriginal peoples of the world use this guising as a way of unmaking reality, so the new reality may be created. The practical aspect of Cian's costume is that it allows him to enter a fortress occupied by women. The symbolic aspect of his dress is that he's putting on the garb of the vision seeker in preparation for a journey to the other world. When Birug's ruse gains Cian admission to the tower, she uses an enchantment to put all of Ellen's guards asleep so that Cian may meet with her. When Ellen sees Cian for the first time, she recognizes him as the man from her dreams, and they make love, conceiving Lu. After this, Cian is swept away on a blast of wind. A wind brought Cian to the island, and a wind took him away from the island. This is consistent with a shamanic journey as well. Such journeys were sometimes referred to as riding the wind or walking on the wind. Wind represents the powers of chaos, and the other world is the birthplace of chaos. Ellen, as a daughter of Balor, is literally a daughter of chaos. Cian, on the other hand, being a son of the Tuatha, is a child of order. So the union of Ellen and Cian is a union of chaos and order, as we already noted. This union brings forth Lu, the many-skilled sun god. Balor finds out about the birth of Lu and seeks to drown his grandchild in order to prevent the curse from happening. In a scene reminiscent of the birth of the bard Taibhsear, Balor puts Lu in a cloth and seals it with a pin, intending to drown the child in the ocean. But as they are carrying him on a current to the sea, the pin drops out, and Lu falls into the ocean. Thinking him to have drowned, Balor then departs. But Birug, presumably watching the whole thing from a distance, rescues Lu and takes him to be fostered by Taibhsear, daughter of the king of the Great Plain. The king of the Great Plain here was the king of Spain, according to the Liber Gabala, So like Taibhsear, Lu was rescued from the sea and placed with a family of noble birth for fostering. And like Taibhsear, Lu was a master of the bardic arts. The story then skips ahead to Lu's coming to Chower, where he seeks admission to Nuada's court by claiming to be a master of all arts, as we discussed on last week's podcast. Nua, like Lu, is the son of the Tuatha, the children of the goddess Danu. Nua's kingdom is forced to pay taxes to the Fomorians. Baelor, Lu's grandfather, was a Fomorian. So the story has Lu joining his father's people to make war against his mother's people. The Fomorians, as living embodiments of the forces of nature, represent the powers of chaos and darkness, as we've already noted. The Tuatha, as living embodiments of learning, magic, and wisdom, represent the powers of order and light. As this section of the story begins, the powers of chaos hold dominion over the powers of order. The Fomorians demand tribute from the Tuatha. Lu seeks to restore balance to the situation by conquering the forces of chaos. It's important to note here that Lu's father was a son of light and order, and his mother was a daughter of chaos and darkness. So Lu has the forces of chaos and order within himself in equal measures. He seeks to conquer the powers of chaos, and the first step in this task, after gaining admission to the halls of power, is to meet at a place called the Whisper of the Men of Dea. In Irish, Dea is a prefix meaning of good and positive qualities. So the Whisper of the Men of Dea means the whisper of the good men. The good men Lu meets with are Nua, the Dagna, Agma, Goevneu, and Dian Kiet. Before discussing these good men, let's recap where we've been so far and reflect on how Lu's birth touches on the journey of the Taibhsear. First, Lu is born in a mystical place in the other world. His mother is a daughter of chaos, and his father is a son of order. His grandfather had him tossed into the sea, where he is presumed to have drowned, but instead he was rescued by the female druid Birug of the mountain, who fosters him with the daughter of the king of the plain. The story remains silent on his fosterage, but it's safe to assume that he was raised in Spain, across the sea from his home of Ireland. When he returns to his homeland, he is Samaldanic, a master of all the arts. This indicates extensive training during his fosterage, as well as a talent for many skills and crafts. Placing him in Spain also meant that he was a Celtiberian. At the time this story took place, the Celtiberians were among the most skilled and learned of all the Celts in the world. How does the story thus far relate to the way of the Taibhsear and the journey of the shaman? If we look at Lu's birth as a metaphor for the birth of a Taibhsear, the story becomes clearer. Lu is born when a son of order enters the other world and mates with a daughter of chaos. This relates to how a Taibhsear must be familiar with both the forces of light and darkness. Note that although Lu's father, Kian, visits his mother, Ellen, in the other world, he does not stay there. He's borne away on a blast of wind. This could be seen as a warning not to dwell too long in the darkness, but to learn its lessons and then move on. After Lu is born, his grandfather attempts to kill him by trying to drown him, but instead he's rescued by the powerful seer and druid Birug of the mountain. Those who are called to the way of the Taibhsear often refuse the call at first, because of the demands of the society that they are born in, or the expectations of their family and friends. Sometimes family members try to drown the seeker's journey before it begins by discouraging them and telling them to seek a more normal path. But Lu escapes this fate when he's rescued by a powerful Taibhsear and placed in foster care. This mentor and messenger from the other world knows what is best for Lu, and she makes sure to place his feet on the path that will lead him to meet his destiny. Lu's foster parents live in a land that excels at all the arts and crafts, so by leaving the land of his birth, Lu is able to learn many skills and become a master of them all. This eventually allows him to return triumphant and victorious to his homeland, to join his father's people in their battle against the powers of chaos and darkness. The fact that Lu is Samaldanic, a master of all the arts, tells us that the way of the Taibhsear is a many-faceted path. In order to walk between the worlds, we must first learn everything there is to know about this world. When we have learned, then we may step into the other world to challenge the powers of chaos. Mastery of all arts allows us to use many things to assist us on our journey. Finally, at this point in the story, Lu has learned about his powers of light and his powers of darkness. He's walked in both worlds. Now he is returning home to his father's people to help them to defeat the powers of chaos. For those who seek to walk the warrior way, this part of the story tells us that Lu has both light and dark within him because of his parentage. He therefore knows about the powers of darkness. But although he acknowledges this part of himself, he also knows that he cannot dwell forever in the darkness. To do so would make him just like his grandfather Balor of the Evil Eye. So instead, Lu decides to do battle with the armies of chaos, and he joins Nua's court and the children of Danu in order to do so. They meet at this place that thereafter become known as the Whisper of the Good Men, to plot their revenge against the Fomorians. It's significant that there are 5 who attend the meeting with Lu. There are 5 kingdoms or provinces in Ireland. There are also 5 elements and 5 directions if you count the center. There are also 5 stations in life: the bard, the druid, the warrior, the farmer, and the artisan or the noble. Each of the attendees at this meeting represents one of the stations of life and one of the directions. Each also represents one of the elements. Nua, as king, represents the noble artisan. His element is quintessence, or ether, and his direction is the center. His ruling aspect is balance in mind, body, spirit, and emotion. As champion of the court of Chaur, Agma, Nua's brother, represents the warrior. His element is earth, and his direction is north. His ruling aspect is honor and chivalry. Cian's brother and Lu's paternal uncle, Goevneu, is a blacksmith of great reputation. Having the ability to literally beat swords into plowshares, he represents the farmers. His element is air, and his direction is the east. His ruling aspect is lust for life and taking pleasure in the good things that life has to offer. The Dagda, the good god and the father of all the other gods, represents the Druids. His element is water, and his direction is the west. His ruling aspect is growth in knowledge, and therefore growth in love. Finally, Diankiet is there representing the bards. As a healer of the Tuatha his ruling aspect is creativity and clarity and the light of healing. His direction is the south, and his ruling element is the fire of purity. So at this meeting, the good men of the Tuatha formulated their strategy for conquering the Fomorians. This council covered all the directions, all the elements, and all the professions. So what's the lesson here for the aspiring Taibhsear? Lu was skilled in the ways of all the arts, but he still needed help from the good men of the children of Danu to help him conquer the powers of darkness and chaos. The lesson to be learned here is that no one, no matter how talented or skilled, exists in a vacuum. We can always learn and seek counsel from others, especially when seeking to conquer the darkness within ourselves. The shadow side is a seductress, and we may sometimes need the help of others to resist her temptations. Lu knew this and sought the advice of trusted friends on his path to the way of the Taibhsear. Next week, we'll explore how they came to conquer the powers of chaos embodied by the Fomorians, and how this relates to the way of the Taibhsear. This is our Beltane 2016 podcast. Beltane is one of the 4 fire festivals during the year, the other 3 being Imbolc, Samhain, and Lunasa. The word Beltane comes from the Celtic sun god Bel, or Belenus, and Chenya, meaning fire. So Beltane, or Belchenya, means Bel's fire. Beltane and its counterpart, Samhain, are the 2 times of the year when the veil between the worlds is the thinnest. It's a good time to commune with nature spirits. Beltane occurs on May 1st, or May Day, halfway between the vernal equinox, Alban Eiler in some Druid traditions, or Ostara in others, and the summer solstice, Yule or Alban Erwin. It's a celebration of fertility and the light of the sun. The fire circle of Belchenya, or Beltane, celebrates music, lovemaking, fertility, and life. Traditionally, the bell fire is lit at sunset on April 30th and kept going until sunset on May 1st. The bell fire is lit with a sacred bundle of 9 different types of firewood. These woods are tied into a bundle with colored ribbons and are lit ceremoniously at sunset. All 9 are trees or plants of the Celtic Ogham. The 9 sacred woods of the bell fire are birch, oak, rowan, willow, hawthorn, hazel, grapevine, apple, and fir. Once the fire is lit, most groves have drumming, singing, and dancing around the fire. This sometimes lasts all night. One of the fertility rites of Beltane is jumping over the fire. Young unmarried people jump over the bell fire while wishing for a lover. Young married women would leap the fire in hopes of becoming pregnant. In modern times, Beltane includes drum circles, hoop dancers, fire spinners, and fire dancers. These rites often go on all day and all night, so if you're invited to a Beltane celebration at a campground, don't expect to get a lot of sleep that night. Spiritual significance of Beltane. The concept of sovereignty in the way of the Taibhsear and most other forms of Celtic paganism is the idea that the land and the king are one. This means that the goddess, represented by the earth herself, unites with the king or the god, represented by the sun. This also represents the union of telluric, earth energy, with solar energy. It also represents the union of the powers of chaos with the powers of order. The uniting of these energies makes all of creation possible. Just as a seed or a plant needs both earth and sunlight to grow. Beltane is a good time for appreciating life and abundance. The first day of May is considered a magical time, especially if you are near a source of wild, running water. It's a time to begin new acts of creativity and growth. Symbols of Beltane. The maypole is a well-known symbol of Beltane. It is, of course, a phallic symbol, rooted in the earth and pointing towards the sun. As the dancers weave the ribbons around the maypole, they enact the Great Marriage, or the Great Rite, also known as Hieros Gamos. This dance also symbolizes the weaving of the telluric energies from below the earth with the solar energies from the sky. Flowers associated with Beltane include primrose, yellow cowslip, hawthorn, roses, roseberry, and ash trees. This is also the time of year for making new brooms or besoms, weaving baskets, and making new butter. Any of these may be used for decorations at this time of year. Gods and goddesses of Beltane. Beltane is associated with the Celtic god Bel, also known as Balar or Belinus. Bel is the Celtic god of the fire and of light. Beltane is also associated with Cernunnos in his green man aspect, who mates with the goddess in her role as the May Queen. There are also figures throughout the British Isles called Sheila na Gigs. These figures, probably medieval in origin, depict a woman with an engorged vulva. Some scholars believe that these figures represent a lost fertility goddess, and many pagans and some Taibhsears have taken to associating the Sheila na Gig with Beltane celebrations. Colors of Beltane. White represents the goddess and the May Queen. It also represents the return of light to the earth as the sun waxes, and is a symbol of purity. Green represents fertility and the return of plant and animal life to the land. Green is also a healing color associated with the green man. Red represents romantic love, sex, and the great rite at this season. Traditions of Beltane. Jumping over the broomstick and jumping over the bellfire are common traditions for this holiday. Many groves and circles also elect a May Queen and a king who officiate for the day. Sometimes a wild hunt is enacted in which attendees select one or more persons to be the prey. The rest then hunt this person. Colorful animal costumes may be used for the prey and for the hunters. In some more sexually liberated groves, this hunter and prey scenario takes on a more sexual theme, with partners stalking each other during the wild hunt prior to a sexual contest. Mutually agreed upon, of course, after the hunt. This enactment of the wild hunt is more playful than the darker performance of the same event at Samhain. The Samhain wild hunt focuses on the journey of the dead, while the Samhain wild hunt is about death and dying. The Beltane wild hunt is about birth, fertility, and sexual union. In ancient times, people went a-maying. This meant that the young couples took their partners off into the woods for an evening of wild lovemaking. Some modern Beltane celebrations also observe this rite, but most are a lot more family-friendly. Just in case you're invited to a Beltane celebration for the first time, just to be on the safe side, you may wish to clarify which type you're attending. Traditional foods for Beltane include sweets and dairy desserts such as custards and ice creams. Honey and oats are also common fare, both as foods and as offerings to the gods and the goddesses and as libations. Red foods such as strawberries, cherries, or green foods such as salads and leafy vegetables are also common fare at this time of year. Oatmeal or barley cakes, known as Beltane cakes or Belchinia cakes, are also eaten quite often at this season. In whichever way you choose to celebrate this holiday, may yours be a blessed one. The Green Corner, Sustainable Transportation. Today we're going to look at human-powered vehicles. In 1817, Baron Carl von Drace invented the prototype bicycle called the velocipede. The velocipede was basically a bicycle without pedals. He used it to get around the extensive gardens in his estate more quickly. It was propelled much like a skateboard by pushing off the ground with both feet. Incidentally, the reason that von Drace focused on inventing a horseless form of transportation is that the price of grain, used for horse fuel, if you want to call it that, had suddenly risen in his native Germany. In the 1800s, the bicycle went through many incarnations alongside its cousin, the automobile. Developments in metallurgy and other technologies have given us lightweight bicycles that we have today. The bicycle may just be the most efficient form of transportation ever invented. Even a person who is only moderately fit can make a trip of 10 or 15 miles in less than an hour on a good bicycle. With only an afternoon's education, even technically inept people like myself can learn to do basic repairs on a bicycle. They are very affordable, even for people of modest means. And they're so easy to operate that a child can do it, and most children enjoy doing it. One drawback to the bicycle is that while it's an excellent way of getting an individual from one place to another over relatively short distances, it's not much help carrying cargo. If you have anything bigger than the average briefcase with you, it's going to be difficult to do it on a bicycle. Fortunately, tricycles aren't just for children anymore. In fact, the original tricycle was invented for adults in the middle 1800s, so that bicycle enthusiasts could take more passengers along with them. Today's tricycles are highly efficient, multi-geared, and lightweight. Most come with a cargo basket attached to the back, and they can be purchased for as little as $300 or $400. There are even four-wheeled bicycles called quadricycles, with even more cargo capacity than the tricycle. Such vehicles are perfect for those trips to the corner market or for just cruising around the neighborhood. There are collapsible models that you can fit into an automobile bike rack too. This makes such vehicles perfect for family vacations. You can use the family car to get to your vacation destination, then use the tricycle or quadricycle to see the sights. Some quadricycles also come equipped with auxiliary electric motors for those uphill climbs where you might need a little extra assistance. Human-powered vehicles are probably not the best choice for a primary vehicle if you live in a rural environment. Bicycles are better for people who live in towns and cities where everything is centrally located. There's also the consideration of whether the town planners have the foresight to include safe bicycle paths and lanes. Riding in any city traffic without bicycle lanes can be dangerous, not only because of the automobile traffic, but also because you're stuck breathing auto emissions. Even if a bicycle isn't your primary mode of transportation, you can save gas and pollution on those short trips by riding your bike. Bicycles haven't been traditionally as popular in the United States as in Europe, simply because here in the US, things are spread out a great deal more. But even in the US, if you live in the right location, you can replace your car with a bicycle for most close-to-home travel. There are even tricycles and quadricycles that come with roofs, so that bad weather isn't as much of an issue. Ideally, a small-town resident could rely on a bicycle to get to work, a tricycle or a quadricycle for grocery and shopping trips, and an automobile for those long-distance trips to visit relatives or for vacations. And of course, the greatest advantage of a bicycle is that there are no emissions whatsoever, unless you count a little sweat on those uphill climbs. In the way of the Taibhsear, we use the Celtic tree alphabet known as the Ogham. In this section of the podcast, we will present one character of the Ogham each week, offering information on the meaning of each letter of the Ogham alphabet, trees associated with each letter, the healing and magical properties of each tree, gods and goddesses associated with each tree and letter, and the divinatory meanings of each letter of the Ogham. Since we will be discussing medicinal uses of the plants in this segment of the podcast, please remember that herbal medicine requires caution and practice. None of the medicinal uses discussed on the Way of the Taibhsear podcast should be attempted by a novice. Some parts of the plants of the Ogham are poisonous, and people with allergies should also be aware of the potential allergic reactions to plants. If you are interested in herbal medicine, find a skilled practitioner and take lessons. Do not attempt to use medicinal plants without the supervision of an expert. The letter F of the Ogham alphabet is represented by Fagus, the beech. Its divinatory meaning is cleansing, purification, and chastity. Healing properties of the beech. Beech is known as the mother of the woods. The beech queen is the consort to the oak king. Beech nuts are edible, and it is said that Caridwen gained wisdom by eating them. Beech nuts are also high in B vitamins and are therefore very beneficial for pregnant women to help prevent birth defects. Beech leaves rubbed directly on the skin help heal frostbite and minor burns. An infusion of the leaves may be used to treat diaper rash or rashes from poison ivy. It also treats other skin inflammations. Tea made of beech leaves also cleanses the kidneys and stimulates urination. A tea made of beech bark has antiseptic properties and may be used for treating eczema and psoriasis. Magical uses of the beech. The blossoms of the beech help to keep intolerant people away. If you carve a wish on a beech stick harvested on the new moon, your wish will come true by the full moon. Once you've carved your wish on the twig, tie it to the beech tree from which it was cut. A fallen branch from a beech tree is considered to be an invitation from a fairy to make a wish. Push this branch into the ground after carving your wish on it, and the fairies will take it to the Sidhe for consideration by the fairy queen. Beech rods are favored by water dowsers. For good luck, carry 3 beech nuts in your crane bag. Because the roots of the beech tree resemble serpents, it's a tree often associated with snakes and with the telluric energies of the earth. As such, it is a tree of the goddess. The Irish god Agma, brother to King Nua and champion of Chower, was a child of Danu who created the first Ogham alphabet, and the alphabet bears his name to this day. According to legend, he wrote it first on a beech tree, and beech trees have been used throughout history for making paper. According to legend, the first books were made by making pages of thinly sliced beech wood. It is possible that there is some truth to this legend, as the Anglo-Saxon word for beech is bok, and this word later became book. In modern Swedish, the word bok still means both book and beech tree. Gods and goddesses associated with the beech are Sequania and Agma. You've been listening to the Way of the Taibhsear podcast on International Pagan Radio, where it's all pagan all the time. This has been episode 28, Beltane 2016. Music on this episode featured Tir No by Taibhsear and The Owl in Winter by Shenka the Vate. The Way of the Taibhsear is the official podcast of the Order of the Taibhsear. You can learn more about us at taibhsear.com. That's TAIBHSEAR.com. The Way of the Taibhsear is the podcast about Druidry and paganism as practiced by the Order of the Taibhsear. Paganism is a wide and diverse community, and we don't claim to speak for all pagans. You can get in touch with us at the show at podcast@taibhsear.com. That's podcast@TAIBHSEAR.com. The Way of the Taibhsear is sponsored by Elder Grove Seminary, offering the best in pagan education with online bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in ministry and divinity. Learn more about Elder Grove Seminary at eldergrove.org. Until next time, blessings of the ancestors.